My name is Sloan Merritt. I'm 31 years old. And I didn't know my relationship was already rotting from the inside until I walked into our living room on an ordinary October Tuesday and read a sentence that turned my future into a joke. It wasn't dramatic at first. No screaming, no lipstick on collars, no late-night confession. Just a phone on a coffee table, face up, like it had nothing to hide. We'd been together 3 years. 3 years of routine stacked so neatly, it started to feel like permanence. The same grocery runs, the same shows at night. His shoes always kicked off by the entryway like he owned the place, like we both did. We moved in together after a year. We talked about marriage the way couples do when they assume it's inevitable. Not if, when. And for months he'd been nervous, secretive, in that almost charming way people romanticize, like he was planning something sweet, like I was supposed to be flattered by the careful pauses when I walked into a room, the quick exits when I came up behind him. I thought he was planning a proposal. I thought love was building toward a moment. I thought wrong. That Tuesday, we were both working from our apartment. He'd taken over the bedroom with his laptop and reports. I was in the living room earlier, on my own calls, then I stepped away to answer some emails at the kitchen counter. At some point, he went to shower, and around 6, I came out to start dinner. The apartment smelled faintly like his body wash. Clean, expensive, familiar. The kind of scent that used to make me feel safe. I remember thinking pasta, something easy. I was already mentally listing ingredients when I saw his phone. It was on the coffee table, screen lit up with a new message. I didn't walk toward it like a thief. I didn't creep. I wasn't snooping. It was just there, bright, visible, impossible to ignore from where I stood. The sender was saved as M, and the preview text, only one line, said, "Once she proposes, I'll finally get what I want." My body reacted before my brain did. A cold drop in my stomach, my mouth going dry, like I'd bitten into dust, my fingers tightening around nothing. Once she proposes. I stared so hard the words started to blur, then sharpen again, like my eyes were trying to reject them. She proposes. I was the she. The phone was still unlocked, probably from him checking it before he got in the shower. My hand moved like it belonged to someone else. I picked it up. For a half second, I told myself there had to be an explanation. Something innocent. Something that wasn't what it sounded like. But the thread opened, and the explanation died in my throat. The conversation didn't start yesterday. It didn't start last week. It went back months. At first glance, it looked like two people who knew each other too well. Private jokes, late-night messages, the kind of shorthand you only have with someone you've already loved. And then the tone shifted. Not friendly catch-up. Not closure. Not how have you been. It was intimate. Flirtation threaded with planning. Compliments that were too familiar. References to memories he never told me about. And buried in the middle of it all, like a splinter you couldn't stop pressing with your tongue. A name. M was an M. M was Marianne, his ex-girlfriend. The same ex he'd told me, more than once, he hadn't spoken to since before he met me. That lie hit like a slap. Because the cheating was bad, yes, but the lie meant something else. It meant he'd practiced looking me in the face and saying words he knew weren't true. It meant he'd been comfortable. And comfort is what scares me most in a liar. I scrolled further, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The worst messages were recent, the last 2 weeks. Marianne, so when's the proposal happening? Him. Soon. She's been talking about our future non-stop. I think she's ready. Marianne. And you're still going through with the plan. Him. Of course. Marianne. You're sure she won't suspect anything? Him. She's completely clueless. Thinks we're this perfect couple. It's almost too easy. And then, the message that had popped up as I walked into the room, now sitting there in full context like a verdict. Marianne. Once she proposes, I'll finally get what I want. Marianne. Security. Comfort. A place that feels like mine again. Marianne. Then you can do what you promised. My vision tunneled. I read it again and again, because some part of me kept hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something less cruel. They didn't. My hands started shaking, and that's when I heard the bathroom door open. A click, a soft creak, the sound of his footsteps on the hallway floor. I put the phone back exactly where it was, like I was resetting a trap. Then I moved to the stove and turned on the burner, because I needed my body to do something normal before my face betrayed me. He walked out a minute later in a robe, hair damp, smiling like the world hadn't just tilted. "Hey babe," he said, easy, warm. "What are you making?" My throat felt tight, but my voice came out steady enough to pass. "Pasta," I said. He leaned on the doorway, watching me like I was part of his comfort. Like I was a sure thing. Carbonara? He asked. The way you do it? Yeah, I whispered. Your favorite. Perfect, he grinned. I'm starving. He stepped into the living room, grabbed his phone off the coffee table like it was nothing, and disappeared into the bedroom to get dressed. Just like that. Like I hadn't just read the blueprint of my own humiliation. I stood there stirring a pot of boiling water with a wooden spoon, moving my arm mechanically while my mind spiraled. The relationship I thought I was building, 3 years of shared life, shared space, shared plans, was apparently a stepping stone. Not just for him, for her. Marianne wasn't a ghost in his past. She was present, active, waiting at the edge of my life like a vulture. And he was feeding her. Over dinner, he talked about his day, a project, a meeting that ran long, a coworker who annoyed him. I smiled at the right times. I asked the right questions. I listened like my heart hadn't been turned inside out. Inside, I was numb. It was the numbness that scared me, because anger would have been easier. Anger would have been honest. Numbness meant something in me had already accepted that the person across from me wasn't who I thought he was. After we ate, he leaned over and kissed me. Soft, familiar, almost tender. I kissed him back. Not because I wanted to, because I needed him to believe I didn't know. Later, as we got into bed, he wrapped an arm around my waist like he owned the future. I love you, he murmured into my hair. I stared into the dark, listening to his breathing. I love you too, I said. And I meant it in the way you mean it at a funeral. Quiet, devastated, already grieving. Because somewhere between the coffee table and the stove, something inside me made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him in a burst of emotion. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of watching me unravel. If he'd been planning for months, then I could plan for a week. I lay there still while his breathing deepened, while his body relaxed into sleep. And in the silence, I replayed the message that started it all. Once she proposes, I'll finally get what I want. My jaw tightened. Fine. If he wanted a proposal story so badly, I'd give him one. But it wouldn't end the way he thought. The next morning, I didn't cry. That's what surprised me most. I stared at the ceiling while his arm still draped over my waist, and instead of grief, I felt something sharper, like my mind had snapped into a clean, controlled place where feelings couldn't reach me yet. He rolled over, kissed my shoulder, and mumbled, "Morning." I forced warmth into my voice. "Morning." He yawned, shuffled out of bed, and started his usual routine like nothing was wrong. Coffee, shower, work clothes, laid out with that lazy confidence people have when they believe their life is stable. I watched him move around our bedroom and kept thinking the same thing. You're not nervous because you love me. You're nervous because you're timing a con. When he finally grabbed his laptop bag and keys, he paused at the door. "Big day," he said. "Might be late." "Okay," I replied, soft, easy. He smiled, leaned in for a kiss, and I let him. Then the door clicked shut behind him. And the second the lock engaged, I moved. I called in sick to work with a voice that sounded just tired enough to be believable. Then I stood in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the coffee table like it was a crime scene. His laptop was in the bedroom. His phone, gone with him. But his life was still here. And if he'd been careless enough to leave his phone unlocked, he'd been careless enough elsewhere too. I started with his laptop. Password? Easy. The same one he used for everything, because men who think they're smarter than you always believe they'll never get caught. The desktop opened, and for a minute, all I saw were spreadsheets and work files, and the normal boring clutter of a life that looks innocent from the outside. Then I checked his browser history, his email, his social media DMs, and within 15 minutes, my numbness turned into something colder. The M thread wasn't an isolated slip. It was a pattern. Marianne wasn't just messaging him. They were coordinating. There were emails with restaurant confirmations he'd never mentioned. Calendar invites marked work meeting that lined up with her schedule. Photos, stupid little photos, that weren't explicit but were intimate in the way that matters. Her hand holding a drink across from him, his knee visible under a table, the reflection of her smile in a window. Proof everywhere. And then I found the weekend. 2 months ago, he told me he was going on a guy's retreat, spa, pool, reset weekend. He even joked about how he'd come back reborn and told me not to text him too much because he wanted to unplug. I believed him, because that's what love does when it's comfortable. It stops interrogating. On his laptop, I found the hotel reservation. 1 room, 2 guests, and a confirmation email in Marianne's name. I sat back in the chair so fast it squeaked. My hands covered my mouth as if that would stop the sound of my own breathing. I could have confronted him right then, called him, screamed, demanded answers. But something inside me held tight, because the cheating was one thing, the plan was another. I searched for lease, and there it was, A draft email to our landlord, unsent, asking about adding a partner to the lease after engagement. I searched joint account. A tab opened from the bank's website with instructions about merging finances and adding authorized users. I searched ring. A text thread with a friend of his. Friend, you sure you want to do this? Him. It's not forever. It's just locking things in first. Friend. She's serious about you. Him. Exactly. That's why it works. My stomach turned like I'd swallowed something rotten. Because suddenly the proposal wasn't about love. It was about paperwork. He wanted access. He wanted the legal, financial, social binding that made it harder for me to cut him off cleanly. And Marianne was hovering like a beneficiary. I didn't know which of them disgusted me more. I took screenshots of everything. Every message, every email, every reservation, every draft. I exported conversations into files and saved them to a folder with a boring name like tax documents, because the most effective revenge is boring enough to never raise suspicion. Then I called my lawyer. Not a divorce lawyer. We weren't married. The attorney who helped me when I signed this lease, who handled a contract dispute for me last year, who spoke in calm sentences that made panic feel manageable. When he answered, I said, I need advice, and I need it fast. He didn't ask for drama. He asked for facts. So I gave them. I told him about the messages, the ex-girlfriend, the proposal scheme, the lease draft, the joint account tab. When I finished, there was a pause. Then he said, you need to protect yourself financially and legally. Now. My throat tightened. Can he claim anything? Like, we've lived together? Not if you're careful, he cut in. But you need to lock down access, change passwords, separate finances, confirm the lease is only in your name, document everything, and if you plan to ask him to move out, do it strategically. Strategically, like it was a business deal, like love hadn't been dragged into a courtroom already. We spent almost 2 hours going over options. He told me what I could do that day and what would require formal notice. He told me how to protect my accounts, my credit, and my lease rights. When the call ended, I sat there staring at my own reflection in the dark laptop screen. I looked like someone who'd been sleeping through her own life, but I was awake now. That afternoon, I changed every password I had. Email, banking, lease portal, phone provider, everything. Then I called my bank and confirmed no one else had access, no authorized users, no helpful add-ons. Then I called my landlord. I kept my voice steady, polite. Hi, I said. I just want to confirm the lease is solely in my name and cannot be modified without my written consent. The landlord sounded mildly confused, but he confirmed it. I wrote down the date, time, and who I spoke to. Every detail became a weapon. By late afternoon, my next step was the one that hurt the most. The engagement ring. The ring I'd believed meant forever. The ring he likely already bought, not because he wanted to marry me, but because he wanted me bound. I drove to the jeweler, the same place he'd taken me once, months ago, just to look like it was a casual date. The bell chimed when I walked in, and the air smelled like polished metal and expensive perfume. The owner recognized me immediately, because he had one of those faces. Kind, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who watches people the way a bartender does. He smiled. Back again? I swallowed. I need to return something. His expression shifted when he saw my hands tremble slightly as I placed the ring box on the counter. I know your policy, I said quickly, but circumstances changed. He didn't reach for the box right away. He just looked at me and asked softly, do you want to tell me what happened? I didn't plan to. I didn't want to say it out loud, but the words came anyway, brittle and quiet. He was going to propose for the wrong reasons, I said, and his ex-girlfriend, they've been planning it, using it. The owner's mouth tightened. He didn't look shocked, just tired, like he'd seen enough people break inside his store to recognize the shape of it. He opened the box, examined the ring, and nodded. Our policy is strict, he said, but I'm not. Relief hit me so hard my eyes burned. He processed the return. Then, after he took the ring out, he paused, and he slid the empty velvet box back across the counter toward me. Keep the box, he said. I blinked. Why? He didn't smile, not exactly. More like he was offering me something heavier than jewelry. Sometimes, he said, the gesture is more important than what's inside. I stared down at the empty box. It felt light in my hand, but it carried a kind of weight that made my throat close. I nodded, unable to speak, and walked out with nothing but an absence. An absence I hadn't realized could be so powerful. That night, my boyfriend came home late like he said he would. He tossed his keys in the bowl by the door, kissed my cheek, and asked about my day. I told him quiet, I wasn't feeling great, so I stayed home. His eyes softened with something that looked like concern. But now I knew how easy it was for him to perform. We ate dinner. We watched TV. He laughed at something on screen like he wasn't a man plotting the end of my life behind my back. And while he talked about someone at work getting engaged, crazy, right? It's like everyone's doing it these days. I sat there nodding as if my heart wasn't turning into a locked room. Because I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to break down. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to let him believe the dream was still coming. For the next week, I played the role he expected. Girlfriend, future fiancé, the clueless woman he and Marianne had joked about. He started dropping hints like it was a game. Jenny from work just got engaged, he said one night, scrolling his phone. Huge diamond. I smiled. Lucky her. Another day. Saw this proposal video online. Insane. People are so extra. I laughed softly, even though my stomach churned. Because every hint told me one thing. He was getting closer to springing the trap. And I was building mine, quietly, behind the scenes. By Friday, the evidence folder on my laptop was thick. Screenshots, emails, reservation confirmations, drafts, notes. My lawyer had told me to prepare for the moment I'd ask him to leave. To have everything in place. Locks, accounts, lease confirmation, and then the empty box. My fingers brushed it that night in my desk drawer. Velvet, smooth edges, an object designed to promise something valuable. But empty. I closed the drawer. On Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after I read that message, I turned to him while he was pouring coffee. We should go to our favorite restaurant tonight, I said lightly, the one with the corner table. His eyes lit up instantly. The reaction was almost comical, if it didn't make me want to be sick. Oh, he said, trying to sound casual. Yeah, that sounds amazing. You should dress up, I added sweetly. Make it special. He smiled like a man standing on the edge of a finish line. And I smiled back like a woman holding the starting gun, because I knew exactly what he expected to happen at that table. He thought he was about to lock me in. He had no idea he was about to open a box and find nothing inside. He spent all afternoon getting ready. That was the first thing that made me feel detached. I watched him move through the apartment with a kind of focused excitement I hadn't seen in months. He shaved carefully, changed shirts twice, asked my opinion on his jacket like it actually mattered. Too much? He asked, adjusting the collar. No, I said, it looks great. And it did. He looked exactly like a man about to propose, confident, hopeful, convinced the evening would end with applause and permanence. I stood in the doorway while he got dressed, pretending to scroll on my phone, memorizing details instead. The way his hands shook just slightly as he buttoned his shirt, the way he checked his pocket more than once, as if making sure something important was there. The way he avoided my eyes for half a second too long, like he was bracing himself for the performance. I wondered how many times he'd rehearsed this moment in his head, how many times Marianne had helped him plan it. At exactly 6:45, he grabbed his keys and opened the door for me like a gentleman. You ready? He asked. I picked up my purse. Yeah. The restaurant was warm and dim, just like I remembered. Low lighting, soft music, that familiar hum of conversation that makes everything feel intimate even when you're surrounded by strangers. The hostess smiled when she saw us. Right this way. She led us straight to the corner table. Our table, the one where we'd sat on our first date, knees brushing under the cloth, laughing too loudly because we were nervous and excited and believed beginnings always led somewhere good. His hand rested on the table, palm up, waiting. I placed mine in his, felt the warmth of his skin, the practiced squeeze. You okay? He asked, eyes searching my face. Yeah, I said, just taking it in. He smiled, satisfied with that answer. We ordered drinks, then dinner. He barely touched his food. He kept glancing at his jacket pocket like it might disappear if he didn't check on it every few minutes. His knee bounced under the table. His smile flickered in and out, almost boyish. Nerves. Anticipation. Hope. Misplaced, but sincere. I ate slowly, calmly. I wanted my hands steady. I wanted my body obedient. I wasn't angry. That surprised me too. Anger would have made this messy. This felt surgical. After dessert arrived, something chocolate he insisted on sharing, I reached into my purse. His eyes widened, just slightly. Enough. I pulled out the small velvet box and placed it gently on the table between us. Time did something strange then. The music faded, the clinking glasses softened. Even the voices around us seemed to pull back, like the world had leaned away to give us space. His face transformed. Pure joy, relief, triumph. He swallowed hard and laughed quietly, running a hand through his hair. Hey, he said, you're gonna make me nervous. I kept my voice even. We need to talk about our future. He nodded eagerly. Too eagerly. Okay, he said. Yeah, of course. He reached for the box. Before you open it, I added, I want you to know something. His hand paused. I've spent 3 years with you, I continued. 3 years believing we were building something real. 3 years trusting you with my life, my space, my plans. Something shifted in his eyes. Confusion crept in at the edges. Sloan, open it, I said. He picked up the box with both hands. His fingers trembled as he lifted the lid. And then, nothing. Just empty velvet. A hollow square where something precious was supposed to be. The silence between us stretched. His smile froze, then cracked, then collapsed. I don't understand, he said softly. I didn't rush. I let the moment sit there between us, raw and exposed, like a truth that couldn't be put back in its box. I found the messages, I said, all of them. His face drained of color. With Marianne, I continued, your ex-girlfriend, the one you said you hadn't spoken to since before you met me. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Sloan, that's not... I know about the plan, I said. I know you were waiting for a proposal so you could lock things in. The lease, the accounts, the security. I pulled my phone out and slid it across the table. Screenshots lit the screen like evidence in a courtroom. His own words, her replies, dates, times. Months of betrayal reduced to glowing rectangles. Nearby, a couple at the next table glanced over. A fork clinked too loudly. Someone whispered. His voice dropped to a whisper. Please, let's talk about this at home. No, I said, I'm done talking. His eyes darted around, panic flickering now. You're taking things out of context. There is no context where once she proposes I'll finally get what I want is innocent. He reached for my hand. I pulled it back. The lease stays in my name, I said. You're not on my accounts, and as of tonight, you're moving out. His jaw tightened. You can't just kick me out. I can, I replied. My lawyer confirmed it. You've been living there as a guest. That landed. Hard. This is insane, he hissed. You're humiliating me. I stood up and placed cash on the table. You humiliated me first, I said quietly. You just didn't expect me to notice. I picked up the empty box and placed it back in front of him. Keep it, I said, a reminder of what you almost got away with. Then I walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. That night I went home alone. I changed the locks, packed his essentials into 3 suitcases. Then I called his friend. Hey, I said when she answered. We broke up. He's going to need a place to stay tonight. Can you help? She sounded stunned, confused, but she agreed. I texted him the address and told him his bags would be outside. At 10:03 p.m. he showed up. I watched from the other side of the door as he knocked, called my name, knocked again. For 20 minutes. I didn't answer. Eventually, he took the suitcases and left. And just like that, the man who thought he was about to secure his future walked away with nothing but an empty box. The silence afterward was louder than the confrontation. For the first few days, I kept expecting something. Rage, regret, collapse. Some emotional avalanche to catch up with me for what I'd done. It didn't come. What came instead were the calls. He tried from his number first. Then from unknown ones. Then from an email address I'd never seen before. Long messages that swung wildly between apology and accusation. I can explain. You didn't let me explain. You embarrassed me. I loved you. You overreacted. Please just talk to me. I didn't respond to a single one. My lawyer sent him formal notice 2 days later. 30 days to arrange pickup of the rest of his belongings. Communication through counsel only. That's when the anger kicked in on his end. He sent one final voicemail, voice sharp and shaking. You had no right to do this to me. You ruined everything. I listened once, then deleted it. Because here's the thing, no one tells you about betrayal. The moment you stop engaging, the power shifts completely. A week later, Marianne called me. I recognized the number from the screenshots. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message anyway. You had no right to involve me, she said, her tone clipped and furious. This was between you and him. I laughed, out loud. When I finally texted back, I kept it short. You were already involved. You just didn't expect consequences. Good luck. She never replied. According to mutual friends, people who suddenly seemed very eager to give me updates, I didn't ask for. The 2 of them tried to make it work. 2 weeks. That's all it took. Turns out when the plan collapses and there's no security to extract, the fantasy dies quickly. Without my apartment, without my stability, without the illusion of a prize at the end. They didn't have anything real. Just appetite. 3 weeks after the restaurant, I got an email from him. It was long, rambling, careful in the way manipulation always is. He said the messages were taken out of context. He said he'd been venting. He said he felt pressured to commit and didn't know how to say it. He said I broke his heart. He said humiliating him publicly was unforgivable. He said he still loved me. I read it once, then deleted it. There was nothing to explain. His own words had already done the explaining for him. A month later, he came to get the rest of his things. I asked my sister to be there, quietly sitting in the living room, pretending to scroll through her phone, present as a witness. He arrived with 2 friends, avoided my eyes, moved through the apartment like a guest who knew he'd overstayed. No shouting, no drama, just the sound of drawers opening and closing, boxes taped shut, pieces of a shared life reduced to objects again. At the door, he paused. "I hope you're happy," he said, not angry, just exhausted. I met his gaze. "I'm not happy," I replied, "but I'm not being used. That's better." He nodded once, then left. That was the last time I saw him. A couple months later, I saw on social media that he'd moved back to his hometown. New job, new apartment, a fresh start that conspicuously did not include Marianne. People had opinions about how I handled it. Some said the restaurant scene was too harsh, that I should have confronted him privately, spared him the embarrassment. Others said public plans deserve public consequences. I don't know if I did the right thing. I know I did the honest thing. The empty box had been the perfect symbol, a promise of something valuable that turned out to be hollow, just like the relationship. I went to therapy for a while after that, not because I was falling apart, but because I didn't want bitterness to calcify into something permanent. My therapist listened to the story, nodded, then said something that stuck with me. "You already got your revenge. Now the question is whether you want to carry it with you." So I didn't. I focused on myself instead. I went back to the gym, picked up hobbies I'd let slide, reconnected with friends I hadn't seen enough, because I'd been building a life around someone who was never fully there. Slowly, the apartment stopped feeling like ours. It became mine again. I went back to the jeweler a few weeks later. The owner recognized me immediately. "How did it turn out?" he asked. I smiled. Small, real. "Exactly how it needed to." He nodded. "The empty box worked then." "It did." He leaned on the counter. "Sometimes the most valuable thing we can give someone is the truth, even when it's wrapped up pretty." I haven't started dating again. I'm not ready. The idea of trusting someone enough to let them plan a future beside me still feels fragile. Maybe that will change. Maybe it won't. What I do know is this. I will never ignore red flags again. I will never confuse comfort with honesty, and I will never let someone use love as leverage. The empty ring box is still in my desk drawer. I don't know why I kept it. Maybe as a reminder. Maybe as proof. Maybe because throwing it away would feel like letting him rewrite the story. Sometimes late at night, when the apartment is quiet, I think about that moment at the restaurant. The look on his face when he opened the box and found nothing inside. The way joy turned to confusion, then to understanding. Part of me still feels a flicker of guilt about the public nature of it, but then I remember the messages. Once she proposes, I'll finally get what I want. She's completely clueless. And the guilt fades. If I ever propose again, if I ever open my life that way, it'll be with a real ring, for a real person, in a relationship built on honesty instead of schemes. He got his empty box. I got my freedom. And I know which one was worth more.